The Supermarket Hole. Chapter 1. The Hole. As time passed, the hole in the supermarket became the talk of the town. People would gather outside the store and stare into it, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. But the more they looked, the more the hole seemed to draw them in. Soon, rumours began to spread. Some claimed that the hole was a gateway to another dimension, while others believed that it was a portal to the underworld. A few even suggested that the hole was a manifestation of some ancient curse that had befallen the town. Despite the wild theories, no one could explain the strange unease that the hole instilled in people. The longer the hole remained, the more anxious and restless the townsfolk became. It was as though the hole had taken on a life of its own, feeding on the collective fears of those who dared look into it. A few days after the hole had first appeared, Daisy was idly walking by the supermarket. The morning was fine, the air cool and pleasant, and she was in no hurry. After a few minutes, she approached the entrance. Daisy leaned against the wall of the supermarket, watching as people gathered around the hole in the ground. It had opened up unexpectedly, swallowing everything in its path. But unlike the others, Daisy felt no urge to look into the pit. She simply shrugged and took a drag on her cigarette. "What do you think it is?" someone asked. Daisy looked up to see a small crowd had formed around her. "A hole," she said dryly. The group chuckled nervously. It was as though they were waiting for something to happen, some kind of revelation. But Daisy knew better. She had seen enough stupid things in her life to know that sometimes there was no explanation. As the minutes ticked by, more and more people arrived. Some were curious, others scared, but all of them were drawn to the hole, unable to resist the pull of the unknown. There was no visible bottom, and nothing thrown in ever seemed to land. The air was motionless. It seemed to defy the laws of physics. Daisy watched as they gathered around the hole, peering into the depths. The hole was pitch black and seemed to go on forever. People would stare into the void and feel an irresistible urge to jump in. The sensation was so overwhelming that some shoppers had to be physically restrained. "Gerald thinks it's the government. A psychological test. See if we's gonna panic. I bet there's cameras on us right now." Blue dungarees adorned a plump figure, short brown hair jostling in time with her words. Greta was the landlord of the tiny apartment that sat above a salon across the road from the supermarket, where Daisy had lived for the best part of 6 months now. "Yep, another great way of wasting our hard-earned tax dollars." Daisy took a drag on her cigarette, humouring Greta. They both knew the authorities had no idea what had caused the hole to appear, and were equally perplexed by its strange properties. Gerald, Greta's dutiful and equally conspiratorial husband, was standing a little bit too close to the hole for Daisy's liking. "Why do you think the authorities haven't come to fill it in? Get us away from here. Seriously, think about it. No news coverage, the police have barely investigated, and the whole town has been free to come back and forth willy-nilly. It's like they want us to come down here and stare into this thing." Gerald's toes were inching closer and closer to the hole as he spoke. Daisy's heart began to beat a little faster as she started to feel anxiety creeping into the back of her mind. "Come on, let's get to the bank while it's still empty," Greta suddenly announced. Her husband, almost reluctantly, turned from the hole and walked back to his wife. As they headed out to the entrance of the supermarket, Gerald looked back, not at Daisy, but at the hole. Daisy ended up staying longer than she thought she would, chatting to various people from town, listening to one exotic theory after the next. She told herself she was only hanging around for curiosity's sake, but every now and again she felt the urge to approach the edge of the hole and look in. She sucked on her cigarette and wondered why the hell she was still hanging around. The evening wore on. The crowd grew more restless. They whispered and muttered as though they were waiting for something to happen, but Daisy knew nothing would. The hole was just a hole, a quirk of nature that had opened up at the wrong place and time. Eventually the crowd began to disperse, some grumbling, others simply walking away without a word. Daisy stayed behind, watching as the last stragglers made their way home. It was only when she was alone that she succumbed to her gnawing curiosity. She stepped up to the edge of the hole, peering into the darkness. She simply stood there, watching as the hole swallowed everything around it. It was an eerie sight, but almost beautiful. She wasn't sure why staring into nothing seemed to be so calming. Daisy took one last drag on her cigarette and flicked it into the hole. She watched as it disappeared into the darkness, swallowed up by the unknown. She turned and walked away, leaving the hole and its secrets behind. Chapter 2. The Curiosity of the Townsfolk. The next morning, Daisy woke up to find that the hole was still there. She had half expected it to have disappeared overnight, but it seems that it was here to stay. She watched from her window as people began to gather around the hole once again. Daisy sighed and got dressed, knowing that she would have to face the curious townsfolk sooner or later. As she walked to the supermarket, she noticed that the hole seemed to have grown slightly, as though it was hungry. When she arrived at the scene, the crowd was already larger than the previous day. People were jostling for position, trying to get a better look at the hole. Some were taking photos, others were making videos. Daisy felt a sense of irritation. It was as though the townsfolk were treating the hole as some kind of tourist attraction, rather than the dangerous anomaly it really was. She made her way through the crowd, trying to keep a low profile. But as she reached the edge of the hole, someone called out to her. "Daisy, what do you think it is?" It was Mrs. Green, one of the town's more gossipy residents. Daisy rolled her eyes. "It's a hole, Mrs. Green. What else could it be?" "But it's so strange," Mrs. Green persisted. "It's like it goes on forever." Daisy shrugged. "It's just a quirk of nature, nothing more." But Mrs. Green was not to be deterred. "Don't you want to know what's down there? Don't you want to find out what's at the bottom of the hole?" Daisy narrowed her eyes. She knew that Mrs. Green was trying to bait her, trying to get her to fall into the trap that had ensnared so many others. But Daisy was not so easily swayed. "I'm not interested," she said, turning away from the hole. "I have better things to do." As she walked away, she heard Mrs. Green muttering to herself. But Daisy didn't care. She knew that the hole was dangerous, and she wasn't about to let her curiosity get the better of her. Over the next few days, the townsfolk grew more and more obsessed with the hole. They would spend hours staring into the darkness, trying to unravel its mysteries. Some claimed that they could hear strange noises coming from the depths, while others said that they could feel a pull drawing them closer and closer to the edge. Daisy found it all rather ridiculous. It was as though the hole had cast a spell over the town, clouding their judgment and making them forget their common sense. But as the days turned into weeks, the townsfolk became more irritable, more argumentative. They would snap at each other, or lash out for no reason. Daisy could see the hole was slowly driving them mad. She couldn't just sit back and watch as the town tore itself apart. Every day the townsfolk would gather around the hole, staring into its depths with a look of longing in their eyes. Why was everyone so obsessed with this damn hole? Chapter 3. The Hold of the Hole. Daisy tried to avoid the hole as much as she could, but it seemed to be everywhere. She could hear it calling to her in the middle of the night, a low hum that seemed to come from the very earth itself. The hole had grown bigger and wider. It was as though it wanted to swallow up the whole town, and the people along with it. The hole had become more than just a curiosity. It had become an obsession. Some of the townsfolk had stopped eating and drinking, lost in the grip of the hollow. Daisy found herself standing outside the supermarket again. She felt a shiver run down her spine. Something was very wrong. A group of people were standing around the hole, holding hands and swaying back and forth, their eyes glazed and unfocused. They were chanting something that Daisy couldn't make out, their voices rising and falling in a frenzied chorus. The people were becoming more and more frantic. She tried to push her way through the crowd, but they were too tightly packed. She could feel their bodies pressing in on her, the smell of sweat and fear filling her nostrils. As she reached the edge of the hole, she saw that some people were beginning to climb down into the depths. They were descending into the darkness with a look of pure rapture on their faces. Daisy tried to grab hold of them, to pull them back to safety, but it was of no use. They were too far gone, lost in the grip of the endless abyss. And as she watched them disappear into the depths, she knew that she had no way of stopping them. Chapter 4. The Fall. Daisy woke in a cold sweat. She went downstairs for a cigarette, the shadow of the supermarket looming over her. There was already a large crowd of people gathered around the hole, staring into its depths. She guessed they hadn't left. She could see the unease in their eyes. They had fully lost their grip on reality. Daisy knew she was the only one left who hadn't succumbed. Without explanation, she found herself at the edge of the hole looking straight down. Only confusion filled Daisy's head. She had no idea how she had moved from the street where she stood just moments before. She couldn't see anything in the darkness, but she could feel the intense urge to just let go and fall in. Something inside made her resist. She turned around to face the crowd and started to speak. "Listen to me, people," she said. "We have to stay away from this hole. It's dangerous, and it's already taken too much from us." But her plea fell on deaf ears. They didn't notice her. "We can't keep losing people, for God's sake, into this damn hole. It's destroying us." Daisy could feel her throat tightening as tears formed in her eyes. She heard a scream, but she could not tell if it was from her or the hole. The people started walking to the edge. Daisy watched in horror as they fell in one by one, realizing she could not stop them. The last person disappeared. Daisy was left alone, standing at the edge, looking down. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath.